Arnold is probably one of the most informed and impassioned people I know. Some of you have already had the pleasure of seeing him speak here in brief moments, and I've had countless people ask me for more. So this is the evening that Gary's going to share with you a lot of very interesting information. Gary's had rather a exciting past. He's never been one afraid of any challenge. He's never been one to back down in the face of supposed authority. And he actually had the pleasure of having a little standoff with Ronald Reagan at one point. Very interesting. I believe it can be Googled and located on the internet. It's pretty entertaining. He was also a former candidate, ran against Leon Panetta, who's now the current head of the CIA. So he's been in the spotlight on many occasions, and at the same time has never stopped, never tired from continuing the research, staying on top of what's going on in the world and how everything connects together. It's truly amazing, and I'm really looking forward myself to seeing him come up here and put all these pieces together literally for us so that we can understand what's going on and what is affecting these revolutions is really what we're going to be discussing tonight, and what's behind them and what spurs the apparent energy of the youth that get caught up in these. So, with no further ado, I would like to bring Gary up here and let him take us away.
Well, most of the people, when they start appraising things, are in an aquarium. You're used to the temperature of the water. You're familiar with the fish and the shells and the pieces around you. You're familiar with them, and you've got a worldview that's compartmentalized inside of an aquarium. A lot of the things that happen in there act very true, and you can go back into your history inside that aquarium and test what is true for you. Now, if you get outside that aquarium, if you're a fish out of water, or you're no longer compartmentalized, you'll find that there's a much larger world. There's a lot more going on than just what's entering us through our five senses. There have been people for years that want to control the world. Some of this is natural. Some of it reaches the point of evil. You've got the nearest formulated, documented time was the formation of the Illuminati in 1776. And that was done by a person that replaced the head of the Jesuits in Ingolstadt University in Europe. And we wouldn't know about this unless a horseman carrying secret papers wasn't struck by lightning. They went and they got the information, and they found the headquarters, one of the headquarters, and when they went to the headquarters, they found ways to recruit, they found codes, they found methods to poison, they found the profession to overthrow all the existing authorities and religious authorities in Europe to elevate those people themselves. Not for the good of the community, not for the good of mankind, but for their own sake. And so it translates, it's different than what the authorities now that are combining all the information, that it's always for our own good, it's for the children, it's for the planet, it's for all these other reasons that we give away our individual freedom. They adopted a Hegelian method. This Hegelian method, it sounds confusing, but it is not. It's very simple. They saw the way to power is to control opposing sides. It's very simple. If you want to sail a ship from San Francisco to Japan, you use the current winds, you lower and drop the sails depending on which way the wind blows. You don't care which way the wind blows. In fact, if you can get the winds to blow or aggravate things to make things, create power, as long as you've got control of both sides, you're going to direct it and you're going to accumulate that power, and you're going to dispense with that machine or that wind or whatever happened at that time. That's irrelevant to your goal. Another way to explain it would, if you were riding a horse, you pull on the reins on one side, the horse will go this way. If you pull on the reins, the left reins, the horse will go the other way. If you pull on both, it'll slow. If you hit the spurs, it'll go faster. It's a very simple mechanism. It's just referred to as the Hegelian method to gain control. The other thing that's incorporated throughout their accumulation of power is that they believe that the state is everything. The individual is irrelevant. It's always the greater good. The individual is dispensable. The state is God marching through history, is what they see. George Washington, well, there were two people that wrote about the Illuminati when they were discovered. One was in France, it was Abbé Barruel, and another person was John Robison in England. And the year after John Robison translated it to English, he sent a copy to George Washington. And George Washington says in a quote that's buried in my papers here, it's not as easily to retrieve, but it's easy for you to find and Google. He says, "I am aware and it is here." He says, "I have no doubt that it is here and I've recognized it." So you've had a sprinkling of it. After Bavaria and a couple other local states banned it, they went from 5 to 2,500. And they were already accumulating a lot of power, and they had convinced a number of princes throughout Europe to adopt it. There were some that were, they ran to the safe havens around Europe. And what they did from there, they kept changing the names. They don't use, they don't wear a sign on them saying who they are. And you can pull that practice all the way to Skull and Bones, which if Skull and Bones is mentioned, they're supposed to leave the room according to their own papers. Now there's a direct link to Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones is a secret society. It was set up in New Haven, Connecticut in 1832. It was done by two people. One was Alphonso Taft and the other was William Russell. William Russell had the drug trade from Europe to China. He actually ended up causing the Boxer Rebellion in China because of their whole nation was broken because of the drugs that were abused there. There is also, William Russell had gone to Germany for schooling before he went back to New Haven and created Skull and Bones. And there were direct links to members of the Illuminati with the Skull and Bones. In the early 80s, I was very fortunate to rent to a man by the name of Dr. Anthony Sutton. He was a fellow at the University of Stanford, and he had been working on for a decade or so a trilogy documenting the Western technology moving to the Soviet Union. And he documents it from 1919 to the present at that time, which was an active Vietnam War. And he brought this information, he's looking at it because even at the present day, when the Vietnam War was active and we were losing our boys and our daughters, we were still funding the manufacturer from the Kama truck factory in the Soviet Union that was delivering the materials to the Viet Cong. The British ships were going in the Haiphong Harbor delivering the weapons to kill our own boys, and that was off limits for bombing. It was outrageous. This goes back to the actual revolution in Russia. There were several people that went to Russia that are again tied to the United States. In New York City, there's a street called 120 Broad Street. It ended up the headquarters of the Federal Reserve, the first embassy for the Soviet Union, General Electric, which has played its role in conspiracy since that time to today. Of course, they had no taxes this last year. We heard they made $13 billion and didn't pay a dime. But they are blessed because they are connected to to this conspiracy. Now, there was a Red Cross mission that went to Russia. And there's a man that said he is there to win Russia for Wall Street. And other people on the mission, when people wrote their diaries, people that were on this journey, laughed at some of the other people that were on the journey because they didn't know what the mission was all about. And you can find that in a book by Dr. Anthony Sutton, and I believe it's Wall Street and, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. But he documents how so-called we were there. Again, it was years earlier in I don't know if we have a slide, but you'll find it in, I didn't bring that particular book, Creature from Jekyll Island by Ed Griffin. And he has a cartoon in there, and the cartoon shows J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, with bowing down to Karl Marx. This is 1911, 8 years before the Communist Revolution. And it was those people that were involved.
And then the Rockefellers funded Marx's work throughout his career.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All the ties and the funding began. I mean, they created it. In fact, Alphonso Taft, the creator of the Skull and Bones, was an ambassador to Russia during the late 1800s. And you've got, even before the Communist Revolution, we did a little bit of this a previous time. We talked about the American-Mexican War, Spanish-American War, let me put it that way. And that's where our battleship was in their harbor less than 48 hours. Normally they have a protocol if you're going into a foreign port with a military ship, you let somebody know. We didn't let them know. The main exploded inside out from later documentation, and we had ships already in Hong Kong ready to go into the Philippines. We had them off of Florida ready to take over Cuba and Puerto Rico. And I mean, it was a planned event, very much like other false flags. And we've got a guy from We Are Change here tonight, and he can tell you all about 9/11. I think a lot of you people are familiar with that. But what was important, that cartoon was written by a man by the name of Robert Minor, M-I-N-O-R. And Benjamin Getlow, one of the top heads of the Communist Party, said he was the most important American figure in communism. He said he comprehended the paradoxical ethical concepts of Lenin and justified every violation or moral code, including the most heinous crimes. This is the other thing you have to understand about this conspiracy, is their pure evilness. They are evil. They are bad. They're not doing it for something good, for a new world government or order, or even a pleasant feudal system. These people are evil, and they've adopted skull and bones. That's the skull and crossbones. They're rituals. They crawl into a coffin. They use human remains, and they make their pledge to each other for this secrecy and this control. And they have always been in charge of murder, whether it's World War I, Henry Stimson, Secretary of War, Skull and Bones. And he was head of World War II. I mean, he was the Secretary of War then, too. And we can go through the Spanish-American War. I won't go through that details because you already had a dose of that. This Robert Minor that wrote this cartoon said, it says here that he was in Russia in 1918 for 9 months. The American military had this communist, the most important communist, according to Benjamin Getlow, head of the Communist Party, imprisoned. And there were calls from the State Department to release him in France, to be released. And when he was in Europe, he met with a man by the name of Colonel House. Now, Colonel House was referred to as Woodrow Wilson's alter ego. He was with them every place, everywhere. Most of the photographs you see of Woodrow Wilson, you'll see another top hat, and that's Colonel House. He was at the founding in 1921, or 1919, Versailles in Paris, for the establishment of the International,
League of Nations.
Yeah, they were creating the League of Nations there, but they created, because the U.S. Senate did not condone or vote for the League of Nations, they created an organization to lobby the United States, pushing them towards a world government. And anyway, the Institute of International Affairs. In England, it's called the Institute of Royal Affairs. In the United States, it has been incorporated as the Council on Foreign Relations. He was there with Allen and John Foster Dulles in 1921 when it was incorporated. He was the one that helped push Wilson to adopting the Federal Reserve, getting rid of the direct election of the United States Senate. That's really important if you don't understand that. It's not a nice thing to give to the people. We have our freedoms because the power was compartmentalized. It was blocked. They broke it up and they fracturized it so one dictator couldn't get it all together and issue executive orders. At that time, before the proposition that made the direct election of senators, each state legislature would select 2 people to be in the upper house to protect that state's rights. You're going to have, California is going to have differences with Louisiana. New York is going to have differences with North Dakota. And that was a way to protect your rights so you wouldn't be homogenized and destroyed. In fact, everything today that's going on in this county, they call it harmonization. That's homogenation. They're making uniform laws in order to create a North American Union here exactly as they did in Europe. You're going to go back to Robert Minor again. This is really important because we see today riots on, people on both sides, and they both have their issues, and they're creating this cockfight in order to take our attention away from what they're doing. Now, they collect the fee when you come in to watch the fight. They don't care which side wins because they control both sides. But they're trying to get this thing going so that they can keep fleecing us like they have for, it's so obvious. I don't need to recount what's happened to us in the last few years. Okay, anyway, Colonel House released the most important communist in the United States. General Pershing was actually involved in wanting to get some of that evidence. But this is what Robert Minor said. And this is important. I believe I brought this up one time before, but I think it's probably the most important thing to understand because we labeled everybody and we're reacting in a way that they want us to react and we're not seeing the full picture. Robert Minor said, Lenin could not afford to tell the whole truth about his entrance of non-Bolsheviks into the government. He must maintain an intransigent front. The so-called nationalization of Russian industry has put the insurgent history back into the hands of the business class, who disguise their activity by giving orders under the magic title of the People's Commissars. Now, does that sound recent or familiar with the various industries being nationalized and then they're going back to the GEs and the General Motors and the things? Or you even have the name commissars. But anyway, this is czars. Right? Take the comma off. But you can find that information in a book by Benjamin Getlow called The Whole of Their Lives. And he talks about how the whole of these various communists were involved. They spent the whole of their lives working for their dreams. Some of them even, a lot of them bought the idea that communism is good. We've seen what it really does. It's a concentration of power. Communism is a tool of the international bankers. Now, democracy is a tool of the international bankers. You will not find the word democracy mentioned once in the Declaration of Independence. You won't find democracy mentioned once in any of the 50 state constitutions. You won't find democracy once in the United States Constitution. If you have a chance, if you open up your brochure that was passed out a little bit earlier, you don't have to open it up. I'll just tell you what's in it. You've got it. This was a training manual from the War Department. Of course, that doesn't, make anything right. You still have to check things out. But this was what was known by the founding fathers and people up until the time democracy turned into a tool for their concentration of power. And this was the definition of democracy under the Citizenship Manual for the training the soldiers and so forth. A government of the masses authorized drive-through mass meetings. The form is direct expression, results in mobocracy. Attitude towards property is communistic, negates property rights. Rule towards law is the will of the majority. Subject to impulse and without restraint, demagogism, agitation, discontent, and anarchy. And of course, this is what happened to democracies throughout history, and this is why the Founding Fathers attempted to avoid it at all costs. But we saw World War I, the war to protect the democracies, to make the world safe for democracy was one of their slogans. We had Halt the Hun, big posters of women and children being, trampled and raped and destroyed. Here's one with a bloody sword, and there's only women under his feet and babies. Now, a lot of us are familiar with Desert Storm. There was a lady that came in there, and she testified that there were hundreds of babies taken out of their incubators and put on the ground to die by the Iraqi troops. George Bush used it in his speeches. They used it before the United Nations. It was on your TV night after night after night. It turns out that was the daughter of an emir, a 15-year-old person. The person had a PR firm, Hill and Nolan, that put this information out. It resulted in a war that killed over 100,000 people, the lives of this 15-year-old girl. Now, the organization that owns Hill and Nolan, it's a PR firm. They con the American people to get themselves immersed into this war because of this horrible tragedy that they did. I mean, who wants to see a baby left on the floor by some brute? But we were brought into the war to make the world safe for democracies by posters just such as that. Anyway, the Hill and Nolan is owned by WPP. WPP is the largest advertising firm in the world, and it is located in London. The man in charge of that organization is a Council on Foreign Relations member that is pushing towards world government. That's their whole intent. In fact, the genesis of that is the roundtables. Cecil Rhodes put together a number of wills. The fifth will was Rhodes Scholars, and the ones after that were the secret wills, which made Rhodes Scholars these people that would be sent out throughout the world advocating and working towards this world government. In the United States, it was formalized in the 40s, mid-40s, under the Fulbright scholarships. Okay. Philip Lader is head of this huge advertising agency. When 2 months ago, we found Evergreen International was dumping aluminum and barium across the United States and the Western countries. We found that the advertising agency for Evergreen International that bought Air America, the CIA operation, anyway, his advertising agency is WPP, the same advertising agency in which protected this lady making the lies that got us into that war. Now, Philip Lader is also on the board of MITRE. MITRE is headed by James Schlesinger, former head of the CIA, and people on that board includes a Rothschild, who is the director of R.C. Russell, the largest aluminum company in the world, which means that they have access to the aluminum that they're dumping daily, and increasingly so. It's really been stepped up in the last 30 days that I've noticed. But the ties go directly from one to another. Again, the move towards democracy did exist. The conversion of the representation by the states from direct election to being elected by the legislatures is a compromise of democracy very directly. And it makes it much easier for those that control the media to go in and to promise things to the people or to get them moving in one way or another or putting combinations together. Whereas the state legislature is a much more complicated situation in which the states would be defending themselves. So that was a big loss. Now, Colonel House also wrote a book, a plan. It's called Philip Drew Administrator. What's nice about this is the free download. And it didn't have his name on it for the first 15, 20 years that it was in existence. But in that book, he advocates having a government as dreamed by Karl Marx. He advocates, the fictional characters in his story, is a military leader. It's a military coup inside the United States. And in the last one or two chapters, you'll find that he's advocating a North American Union. And then he was at the Council on Foreign Relations foundings. This person is very key. People that do research, they'll find tangent connections with the Skull and Bones organizations. But World War I was a disappointment for them. They had to get us involved in the World War, in World War I towards the end of it in order to be a broker at Versailles. Otherwise, they needed the Senate to adopt the League of Nations as a platform to build this world government. And of course, the second attempt was World War II. And there was a California congressman in Orange County. His name is Jerry Voorhees. He was in Europe during the early 40s, and he's writing back that he's seeing contracts between the Nazis and the United States and Britain and others for a post-war cartelization of Europe. This is, again, the beginnings of the European Union. And time after time, let me see if I can run to one or two of these things. In 1942, he's talking about the banks and the Bank of International Settlements. You're talking about Prince Bernard, who was ended up founding the Bilderberger Association. You've got DuPont's. You got Halmar Schlock. I can't pronounce the name, but that was a part of a union bank which had two members of the Skull and Bones and two Nazis on it. It was one of the founding organizations. I think you can find it under Union Bank with a click or two, and you'll find that Prescott Bush. Here we go with the World Bank. You got the Bank of England, the German Bank, the Bank of France, the Bank of Italy, the Bank of Belgium, Japanese Financial Syndicate, J.P. Morgan, First National Bank, etc. He says at the present time, 72% of the voting stock is in the Axis hands, and they're making plans for a European Union and a Bank of International Settlements. Well, they had to get rid of him. And there's a picture on the muckraker.net. Easy Google if you look at George Prescott Bush and Richard Nixon. You'll see that George Prescott Bush, who was a United States Senator from Skull and Bones, came out to Orange County and literally adjusting his hat. They selected him to run for Congress against Jerry Voorhees, and they put all the money in, and this guy was history. And Nixon became history also. Of course, we know that he slid up underneath during the 40s, he continually voted for the Atlantic Resolution, which was abdication of a world government, or at least a world government by English-speaking nations, such as England and Australia and New Zealand, etc. But their plans were to cover the whole world with this. Yeah.
Isn't that the whole Rhodes plan? That was Rhodes's dream, was the domination of the world by the English-speaking people? Yeah,
the Atlantic Union, again, there's a couple organizations that fit this real easy. The other one is the Pilgrim Society. Very fascinating, very powerful people. A lot of the Anglo-American establishment people are involved. At that time, too, in England, you have the Labour Party, the Fabian Socialist, had taken over most of England. And again, the Fabian socialists were connected. They were using Rhodes' monies, Rhodes' fortune, in order to gain power. And they have a stained glass window, and I think I probably have a copy of that somewhere. Here we go. But they have a stained glass window you can find on your computer. Easy Google. Just look up Fabian Society stained glass window and you'll find it. Blown up in the center of the shield, in which they're hammering, molding the world. Like this is, I can't read it. Molding the earth to their heart's desire, I think is the quote. But in the center of it is a wolf in sheep's clothing. I mean, they bathe in their ability to deceive people. I mean, they like it. And the other logo they use is a turtle. And Fabian was a general, a Roman general that used the tactics of delay. Rather than just go in and attack and have it all out right then and there, he'd wait until the right time and then hammer like hell. But that's why they name their society. So they're very calculated. They believe in lies and calculations, and they have been very successful around the world installing these people for world government. And again, the financing usually comes from a couple central banks, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, and some people in Belgium and Switzerland and around. Also, going back to 1913, with that Federal Reserve, which is private, their board of directors has never been published, but in 1976, the House of Representatives published one sheet of stockholders, and they were people from literally around the world. And we'll have this presentation will be edited and we'll be able to slide in documents as I'm talking. So later on you'll be able to see some of the documentation, which make it easier for you. I was working with Bruce here, and I had some income tax I had to do, so we wanted to be able to show some of this immediately as I'm talking about it, but it will be done. I think you're still getting your information here. Before World War II, we're talking about coup d'etats. Dr. Anthony Sutton, again, wrote a book about Wall Street and FDR, and in that book, a lot of people don't know it because it's not in their history books. But there was an attempted coup d'etat in the United States in 1933. And this is what the head of the House Committee on Un-American Activities said at that time. And this is one of the most decorated generals in the United States. This is General Butler, Major General Smedley Butler. This is what the John McCormick, 1935. In the last few weeks, the committee's official life received evidence showing certain persons had made an attempt to establish a fascist organization in this country. There is no question that these attempts were discussed, were planned, and might have been placed into execution when and if the financial backers deemed it expedient. This committee received evidence from Major General Smedley Butler, retired, twice decorated by Congress. Your committee was able to verify all the pertinent statements made by Butler. And this is the one area, you were told that the New York Times is the newspaper of record. Well, they erased this one. You won't find the information that they had in it before. It's a very fascinating story. They sent General Hugh S. Johnson, a former NRA administrator, that was National Recovery Act, not the NRA you're probably thinking of. And J.P. Morgan and Company and Murphy and Company were behind the plot. They mention, again, you'll find the DuPonts and connections to Skull and Bones and the bankers and the Rockefellers, etc. Guarantee Trust Bank. Anyway, they sent the person around to check the fascist organizations in Italy and Germany and France, and came back, and General Butler talked with them a few times and then finally spilled the beans. So I'll try to keep it till later, but what you got?
Was anybody ever able to determine if the honorary Colonel House had anything to do with this potential coup?
I don't recall. My guess, because he's so close to the center of activity, he's related. My guess is he would be in on this. Let me find one. This is another quote by. This is going back to 1915. We're really moving around here. It's hard not to. This is too choice. This was a congressman talking before the House of Representatives, and he says in March 1915. He says the J.P. Morgan interest, steel and shipbuilding power interest and their subsidiary got together 12 men high up in the newspaper world and employed them to select the most influential newspapers in the United States, a sufficient number of them to control generally the policy of the daily press of the United States. These 12 men worked the problem out by selecting 179 newspapers. They found it was necessary only to purchase and control 25 of the greater papers because the other ones would be like feeds like we have today. Everything's AP or UPI. And earlier I was talking about the revolution going on here. It's a red, white, and blue revolution. That's the more important one than all these color ones because we're undergoing right now a coup d'etat. Your city and your county is a contract with ICLEI, which is a front for the World Bank, to impose the harmonization of these laws.
I heard that Bank of America was originally
I think Bank of America was originally Bank of Italy. They're very close to the heart of the conspiracy. But talking about newspapers, the person in charge of AP and the person in charge of all the B papers, Sacramento Bee, Modesto Bee, and so forth, is a man by the name of Gary Pruitt. He used to be head of the Irvine Foundation. They have a lobby in California, which is an extension of Rockefeller's lobby, Common Cause. It's called California Forward. And the people on that, in fact, you're going to have two local politicians before the end of this month having an event somewhere in this county pushing California forward. That's Fred Keeley and Bruce McPherson. But they're totally whoring for the Rockefeller interest and the push towards a North American Union.
One Bay Area. It's called One Bay Area.
California Forward is
California Forward. It's called One Bay Area. They're going to be having these
meetings throughout
the Bay Area.
Okay, thank you. Earlier on, ICLEI, which is the again a front for the World Bank. If you go to their website, that's ICLEI. If anybody wants to look it up. And many of the cities and counties have signed up with it. You go to their report. It might be easier to find on an outfit called freedomadvocates.org. It's a little, you don't have to do the hunting so much, and they've done an expose of it. In fact, the person has been a speaker before here, Mr. Shaw, was part of the Agenda 21 in this area when he kind of figured out it wasn't quite about the environment, it was there's something else going on. And they wrap this stuff up in nice stuff. I mean, people that join these things are trying to do good stuff, and they do. A lot of times you see cleanups, whether it's on the beach or other places or planting trees. Nobody's against that. It's the other stuff. It's all the accoutrements that they put in there that you can do without having the World Bank involved in your life. And since I'm talking about that, the other side of the sheet that you'll see a little bit later is an organization that was designed to take away your self-government some years ago. And they operated out of the University of Chicago. And we know the coups have been taking place in South America and other places by Naomi Klein has done a great book, and she talks about the Chicago School of Politics and so forth, and how they went into Chile and other places. But they use the Hegelian, both sides, so they get somebody that's a little sympathetic to being supposedly against the banks to those being for free enterprise, and it just they just label it and they get us to do the knee jerking, and we need to stop that. But very methodically, the University of Chicago, which is Rockefeller funded, put together a number of unions. On here I think there's about 22 or 23 different divisions. And this is everything from your city managers to your departments of finance to your conference of chief justices to the governor's conference. they put these things together and they created the unions.
So all the employees in your local jurisdiction go to school in Chicago to learn how it's done from the professionals. And they're all trained and indoctrinated the same way.
Not necessarily. They don't all go to Chicago, but they get inducted in various schools of management, and those schools of management subscribe to all the materials that were put together and they also receive the newsletters from these associations. If you're a professional plumber, you want to belong to that, whatever organization that is, so you get your updates. If you belong to the real estate board, you have a real estate license, you want to be kept up to date, so you sign that. So you're getting weekly material. There's conventions where you can use the taxpayers' money to go and have fun, and they bring in speakers that are all edging, pushing towards this new world order. They don't know that it's happening. They're like the fish in the aquarium. Everything seems normal and wonderful to them.
But they're the actual administrators in almost every jurisdiction around the country. It's not your elected leaders. Those are the guys.
Right. In fact, the city management formula for city governments was constructed by them too. In most jurisdictions, if your city councilman goes to a department without going through the city manager, he can go to jail or be fined. So when he campaigns for office and he's going to do all these damn things for you that he says, he can't. And as soon as he's elected, the California League of Cities sends him up for a little class on how he's to behave and how he's to react to people if you go up to the podium. They're supposed to sit there stone-faced and not say a thing. Now the person that put this together was a man by Charles Edward Merriam. He, the University of Columbia, Paris, University of Berlin. It states that Merriam's hand is seen in virtually every facet of modern political science. He is recognized as the founder and shaper of the Chicago School and the behavioralistic approach to political science. So you're like chickens now. You don't have individual rights. You're to be moved around in a behavioral type of form. He's a leader in pursuing private grants and foundation money for funding his research. Of course, that's easy. Merriam was an advisor to several presidents. He had a lengthy career in federal service. President William Howard Taft offered him a seat on the Commission of Energy and Efficiency. William Howard Taft was a member of Skull and Bones. So again, they're all tangential. They're all getting money from this very small core. Skull and Bones is tiny. 1 year they induct only 15 people. And they have this tremendous power that affects every one of our lives in this room. Whether it's the wars overseas, because they're the head of the warring departments or the CIA or the foundations, or whether you got a bump on your road going on home. Whether they're the traffic calming by doing your streets, whether you want it or not. The decisions aren't made here. You should be able to make your own decisions how much government you do or don't want. But you don't have that ability. They deliberately take it away from you. Okay, Merriam wrote a book called The Making of Citizens in 1934. This is a guy that designed how our cities and governments live and how all those people serving those positions think and behave and how they're trained. But his contribution is his Making of Citizens, 1934. In that book, he was laudatory of Soviet Russia, Nazi Germany, and Fascist Italy, using tools to strengthen the sense of national purpose and to achieve policy goals. Again, he got money from the Laura Spelman Rockefeller Foundation, helped organize the Social Science Research Council, which, by the way, has a big mural. It's got pictures of Lenin, Stalin, and marching Soviet soldiers. It's in New York City. And I think the present head of it was Bob Carey. Bruce was helping me on some of this research in our short little bit of time we had. Anyway, the Spelman Rockefeller Foundation finally merged into the regular Rockefeller foundations, which fund most of the policy that happens in your city, most of the things you see on television. Again, we were talking about Miriam's intention on having people, their behavior. And this comes from Charles Edward Merriam in his book, New Aspects of Politics. Quote, control is likely in the future to reach a point where it may be possible to breed whatever type of human being is desired to have. We could breed morons, heavy-handed half-wits if we wanted them. We might even breed strange creatures of burden and toil. Dominated by more spirited beings designed for higher walks of life. I mean, this is what he thinks of people and how they should be used. You go on a little bit further here in his book, The Role of Politics in Social Change. Get this. I mean, these people are evil. I mean, they really are. On page 112, it reads, the essence of an organization is not roughness, as some seem to think, but management. Again, management, Philip Drew, administrator. It's all administration management. But, you know, he's right. He feels real comfortable with the violence, too. Men may be influenced in many other ways than a strap. Behavior successfully organized through medication, through diet, through training, through education. The human system may be reconditioned through glands, perhaps of a bloodstream, though any one of 1,000 minor manipulations, stimulations, gradations, which move silently and subtly towards their appointed end. The strategy of control leans to the side of science. Now, we've been dumped on with fluoride in the water. We have these chemtrails that have been hiked up incredibly. I mean, you can see those things just layer after layer, day after day. A kid can look up and see the tic-tac-toe in the sky. That aluminum and barium and all the other things that have been brought out of that has to be doing something. I don't think it's just to prevent global warming. They're not even admitting they're doing it, and you see it being dumped on us. Where's the California, outfit that's supposed to protect our air? Where's all the environmental groups? They're blind to this? Can't be. It's part of their program, and we are under an attack. It's a red, white, and blue coup d'etat happening. They're messing with what we breathe, what we eat. They're changing our laws right in front of us at every damn meeting they have, and they're calling wars that are by the United Nations and taking our sons and daughters. What are we doing sitting around? How can we, this is it, kids. But this guy, I think he's got more for you. I mean, we talk about fusion centers, and we've heard about, the concentration camps going up. Here, Miriam, on page 106, he writes, imprisonment, intimidation, execution, confiscation may serve the purpose of the moment. They are strong drinks rather than a steady diet, and must yield to a systematic reorganization of power patterns in line of a new social directives. That's Rockefeller. So we can get to the current color revolutions, but there's so much in between that's just a repetition, and it's the same organizations that are doing it all the time. The gentleman that's filming here has contacts in England and has reached a number of groups there fighting for independence and to struggle out of the European Union. And I'll introduce Bill maybe a little bit later, but that's the man at the camera. And I want to go over this particularly because this has very much to do with Europe and England. In the 1940s, a man by the name of Cord Meyer came from one of the secret societies, Scroll and Key. It's also at Yale. He also went to a school before that. It's just like a high school thing, private school. And that was St. Paul's. This is another thing that you need to know if you're going to follow this conspiracy. There's a network called the 10 School Admissions Organization. And you'll find that the people that are tampering around the world and in position have usually attended one of these schools in the New England area. It's very fascinating. You'll find them all over. It'll be names you'll find all the time. But it's kind of a recruiting grounds, and also the sons and daughters of the very wealthy families that have already are part of the constriction of our freedom. But he was the head of the United World Federalist. Today it's called Citizens for Global Solutions. But he, together with William Donovan, who was the first head of the OSS, which became the CIA, and Alan Dulles, who was in 1921 one of the incorporators of the Council on Foreign Relations, put together a group called the American Committee for a United Europe. This is what they did in 1947. They were going to remake Europe to their goals, pushing it into this world government. Now, one of the men on the letterhead of that organization for 13 years was Ronald Wilson Reagan. But the Carnegie Foundation funded it. They merged autonomous institutions into a single administration to proclaim a united Europe. So what's happening in these color revolutions, we've got the CIA and the other organizations, which are quite a few. Again, under Ronald Reagan in the early 1980s, he put together a thing called the National Endowment for Democracy. Again, democracy is now the tool for revolution and the consolidation of a world government as communism is. One of them is called the International Republican Institute, the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs, the Center for International Private Investment, the American Center for Labor Solidarity. Now, you're going to find ex and present politicians broken up just a little bit, but sometimes they're on the same board. You'll have Republican old hacks and present ones involved in doing what used to be forbidden by the CIA to be involved in countries around the world. They're funding political parties, they're funding institutions in order to make regime change so that it will fit into a pattern for a world government. The same damn thing they're doing in our county with ICLEI. The same thing. The color revolutions are here in red, white, and blue. The guy that's head of the National Endowment for Democracy is Carl Grisham. He's the ex-director of the Socialist Party of the USA, and he was a resident scholar of Freedom House. Now, Freedom House was put together by Eleanor Roosevelt and Wendell Willkie. Now, Wendell Willkie wrote a book, One World. I mean, after a while, you kind of get to what they're trying to go to. Also, Freedom House has James Woolsey, CIA. I mean, you got CIA, all this stuff. This is all CIA. The new chairman of Freedom House is William Howard Taft IV, Skull and Bones. They're involved in these color revolutions. They're involved in your life here. They tell you what kind of light bulb you're going to have or what kind of size toilet you're going to use. They talk about how they're going to modulate you and control you, and imprisonment's okay, but it's more clever if they can just administer to you here. Reorganize the power patterns in line with new social directives. It sounds like Leopold or Coonerty here. The role of politics in social change. There will always be streams of red blood, soft acres of flesh, and mazes of, well, I'll have to find the next page here. But it sounds like these guys are serious. They're evil. And maybe somebody else can find what. But anyway, you know where they're going.
What document have you, sir? What paper is that from? When you read?
Oh, this is an article we put together. It's called Planned Tyranny. It was a newspaper we put out in a city in Southern California that was putting together at that time. Agenda 21 wasn't quite there. This was Goals 2000. And I'm glad you asked that. Okay, this is a city manager. He's writing for the Futurist magazine. He put an article in there because he did something real clever that made the people feel closer to government. He issued a certificate of stock to each individual in the city. It was all colored gold and multicolored, must cost him a ton. So he had it put in there, and the California League of Cities published it in their paper. And, I mean, it's just how clever they are. But it turns out he's a member of the German Marshall Fund. And then you look up the German Marshall Fund, and you find people like Robert McNamara, former head of the World Bank. I found the rest of that, acres of flesh. Yeah, they still think blood, blood and sensitive nerves, and those who can read the auspices of fate only in human entrails. I have no desire to wish away the obstacles to advance. But on the other hand, I do not wish to shrink back from a hard task. It is even possible to combine a soft heart and a hard hand, provided that head is not too soft. So they have, the murders is still on deck here with these guys. They're telling you, and they're dropping these death dumps over you daily. And we're taking it. It just knocks, it kills me. Anyway, they did one of these polls in the city down there, for instance, like they do here. Anyway, they did a Project 2000. So anyway, we went in and wanted to see what the results was. It's supposed to be the polling, like they have these little rollout groups and meetings around town. It turns out that they had 86 people reply to a questionnaire with 40,000 citizens. That's 0.0021. And then they take the results of that, and they create an article that goes worldwide in the Future magazine and in the California League of Cities, and that's how they go into other cities, and they all want to adopt it too. This is how they change the laws and harmonize all this stuff. They make it sound so wonderful. And the newspapers are in on it. You've got Bill Gates owns all the three papers here, the Mercury, the Herald, and the Sentinel. The Bill Gates Foundation. Then you got Gary Pruitt with his Irvine Foundation and their advocacy. He's on the AP. So, I mean, you're not going to, the information you get, you're not going to get it from the newspapers. Otherwise, people would be alert. They'd be out there with their pitchforks right now, defending your lives. You got to defend your lives. That's what's happening. They're killing you. This is a slow kill. This is a soft kill. They're killing you. They're enslaving you. You can see the police being set up around the wall to exterminate you. This is no different than Nazi Germany when a few people got out and glad they did. Well, where do you go now? This is worldwide. The head of Interpol, the people that train Interpol, the Justice Department, and all that, is David Boron. David Boron was the longest-sitting chairman of the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee. And when he was in that committee, he got his companions to make a law that makes the University of Oklahoma the place to train all these people. Well, David Boron's, remember the Skull and Bones. These are the guys with the power. These are the guys with the guns. These are the guys with the cartels. We're the peons. They're enforcing feudalism. They talk about reducing the Earth's population. They say it back and forth. Hell, Ted Turner says 250 to 300,000 people. He's really aggressive. You got Jacques Cousteau walking the beach over here, his son, with Leon Panetta and Sam Farr. Jacques Cousteau in the UNESCO magazine. They're going to kill, he says, we need to get rid of 350,000 people per day. In their magazine, UNESCO magazine. UN's great. Rockefeller gave them the damn land, the thing's on. The UN's running the wars. They're taking our kids. What are we going to do? We going to keep up letting this go? We will if we have guys like Michael Jung of the Sentinel newspaper, who's supposed to be the editor. I mean, these guys don't know up from down. I mean, the newspapers and the media is crap. It's lies. The lies change from week to week. You've seen it in Egypt, in Libya, and all of these places. These people were their friends not that long ago. It was... Again, go back to Ronald Reagan. What Ronald Reagan said, it was beautiful. I mean, people had heard Obama, I mean, he talked about no new taxes. He said a lot of good stuff. He was going to get us out of those wars. I mean, he seemed attractive, from what he said. Reagan said a lot of the great things. 13 years in the United World Federalists. His buddies, David Rockefeller, everybody points as a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He puts together, this National Endowment for Democracy, which, sets the world on fire for democracy, like Woodrow Wilson did with his war to make the world safe for democracy. Democracy is communism, basically. I mean, it's a loss of individual freedom. It's a state as God marching forward. You're worthless. You're a resource. You go to collect your unemployment. You go to, what the human resources they call it. Department of Human Resource. You're nothing but product. You're not an individual. That's how they treat you and think how you are. There is, I don't know if I have that book, but I'll just tell you about it anyway. It's probably in one of the newspaper tabloids. Dr. Armand Hammer was the son of the founder of the American Communist Party. After the Venona Papers came out after the fall of the Soviet Union, if we call it that. It was a regime change. We've always had our hands in there. Averell Harriman was an ambassador to there. He was Skull and Bones. But on Dr. Armand's desk in his own autobiography, he's got a number of pictures laid across here. And again, there's Stalin and Lenin and Brezhnev, and then there's Ronald Reagan. Now, I knew a person personally. He was in charge of the American Independent Party down in Southern California, and he was bought off by Armand Hammer. He became an appointee for Mayor Bradley. He was appointed to some of the commissions. Mayor Bradley was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, by the way. But he was hired to create a demonstration that would create a reaction to Reagan so that people would be for Reagan. They did an ugly demonstration. They made it messy to just get those people fired up and mad so that they go out and work for Reagan. And the guy was, like, to say friend, he'd changed, but he was bragging about it. Now, Armand Hammer ended up with the contracts in Libya. It's and also communist China. And I've got in one of these newspapers here the exact executive order from Ronald Reagan where he says it's in our national interest, signed by George Pratt Schultz. Pratt is Standard Oil. The house, the very building that the Council on Foreign Relations operates out of is called the Pratt House. That'd be good. But here's, it's too small for you guys to see, but that's the picture with Armand Hammer and so forth being there. But Occidental Oil got the contracts. Now here's one of them here. Let's see, Occidental Oil accord with China. Armand Hammer, the first U.S. oil company to win offshore thing. Son of the Communist Party. Venona Papers says it's still active, making all the runs back and forth to the communist network throughout the United States, which is, again, the other arm. There's a picture of Lenin, Comrade Armand Hammer, signed. Anyway, it's not what you see. But Gaddafi was conducive to the oil companies. And you can do the same thing with Condoleezza Rice, who was a member of the board of directors on Chevron. They were moving oil in and out of Angola. And their oil facilities were protected by Castro troops against the people trying to fight for independence in Angola. That was some of Dr. Anthony Sutton's material when he was watching all the Western technology moving to the Soviet Union. So they use the communists as a way to rub out people or use them and dispose of them. Okay, one last coup, and we'll get more into the color revolutions. Kennedy went to the London School of Economics. It's a Fabian school. He was expected to fall into this New World Order program. But I think it was the nouveau rich that kind of resisted it. His brother, Bobby Kennedy, worked with Joe McCarthy on a committee when McCarthy was doing some of his investigations. JFK, when he was still a United States Senator, he complained about a Council on Foreign Relations group that turned China over to the communists. It was called the Institute of Pacific Relations. And it had people like Fairbanks and Owen Lattimore and people that, again, mostly Council on Foreign Relations, kind of like the Project for a New American Century, or for like Freedom House, which is permeated with these CFR members. So this was a regime change. They preferred the communists because they're easier to control. It's top down. And in Rockefeller's own memoirs, he talks about how he praises. In 1974, he's so happy with the way that Mao Zedong had taken care of China. Reagan also, during the early 1940s, was with a group, Committee for a Far Eastern Policy, I think it is. Anyway, another communist front that Reagan was in tow with all of the people working in this direction. Of course, he was with the United World Federalists, so that would kind of be natural. But a lot of these groups, the people in them, the people that are volunteering to think that they're doing good, are not clued in. They're not part of the wiring. So when you go to say, what are you doing, then all those people inside are, they push them out in front and say, I'm not doing what you're saying.
Just like the kids in the Color Revolution.
Yeah. These kids, they all think they know it. They know things are bad, and they're given a way to react. They're creating the opposites. So anyway, Kennedy was, not exactly going along with their program. When he appointed his Secretary of State, he had never met him. His name was Dean Acheson, and he put together the first year, a publication called State Department Publication 7277. This is real easy to pick up, again, with a Google. And it tells how they're going to remove the strength of the United States and put all the forces inside the United Nations. This has never been changed, and what we saw in Libya this last week was exactly what went on. Okay, we've got Dean Rusk, Rhodes Scholar. Oh, thank you. Did some good work on there. Okay, I'm calling it Dean Acheson, Dean Rusk. Thank you. We need to correct that on the film here. So anyway, Dean Rusk was, for 10 years before he became Kennedy's Secretary of State, he was working for Nelson Rockefeller Foundation. And as soon as he got in there, he put in the State Department Publication 7277, which turns the U.S. power over to the United Nations. Oh. And so, at the same token, Kennedy issued United States notes. And the United States notes means the Federal Reserve is cut out. This is the whole program. There's nothing more crucial than the Federal Reserve and the international bankers' ability to create money and use money. This is the heart of the matter. You can fight everything else, but eventually you got to, these are the boys. This is what you need to understand. So Kennedy was...
and also he came out against this. We have that.
Very good. I don't know if you want to do that right now, and then we can go to the color. I don't know if you can punch that up. Kennedy was aware of the secret societies, and he was surrounded them. He had two members of the Bundy family. He had McGeorge Bundy and, you can go ahead once you find it. William Bundy, who was head of the CIA, and McGeorge Bundy. Most of them were from Rockefeller and CFR foundations. But
even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it.
Okay, great.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Different era, isn't it? From then he was killed. The Warren Commission ferreted it all out. Had Gerald Ford on there, Bilderberger, who eventually appointed Nelson Rockefeller as his vice president. It had Alan Dulles on the Warren Commission, who he fired as head of the CIA for his invasion of Cuba. There's a member of Skull and Bones on the board. There was a man from Alaska, a congressman, that went down on an airplane that didn't go along with the thing. That's and then Mr. Russell from Louisiana said, at least, he said he didn't think it was Oswald did it all alone. So Earl Warren, there's pictures of him sitting at the foot of the Bohemian Owl up at the Grove. If you look at Langley from an aerial viewpoint, you see the face of an owl, which is kind of interesting. But, and again, up in Bohemian Grove, they have a ritual called the cremation of care. So if anybody from any of these weird groups has any conscience left whatsoever, they go through the ritual and not care anymore if they watch a child being burned in effigy before this monstrous owl. So when Kennedy starts talking about we have no stomach for secret societies and so forth, he was stepping on toes, and he was stepping on toes inside his White House. And a lot of things changed then. You can move up. There's more stories we could... I'd love to go into some more information. We had Leon Panetta on the scene immediately in 1964 campaigning for Nelson Rockefeller. And he has been adopted by the Rockefellers ever since. And he's been their sock puppet. And today he's head of the CIA with all of this going on. It takes the CIA to fly the death dumps back and forth across here, to do what they're doing to us physically. And it takes the CIA to do what they're doing in Libya and Egypt and conducting wars without constitutional authority. And I saw 2 weeks ago the city council on their consent agenda. It's not supposed to come up. They advocated supporting a bill that would have your local sheriff not cooperate with turning criminal aliens to the border patrol or getting back to their country, wherever that country might be. Instead, they wanted them released in this community. That's 5 members of your board of supervisors wants criminal aliens released into your community. Now, you didn't read about it, not this Bill Gates Sentinel, but this is going up and down the state. Now, before the French Revolution, where the Illuminati was very much involved, the Bastille, they release their prisoners. They're trying to create whatever chaos they can. They're reducing the amount of food. Some of you are familiar with that. They're compromising your health every place. They've been deindustrializing the United States every place, everywhere. Global warming's pretty much been proven a fraud. I think a lot of you will see that if you don't believe it yet. I think it moves with the heat from the sun. But they're trying to stop the carbon dioxide, which is really plant food, compared to the death dumps that they're doing on us with aluminum barium. They don't care about that. Let me move towards the color revolution. Again, we mentioned the National Endowment for Democracy. Thank you. One of the organizations that's working as a gaggle trying to do regime change around the world is the Albert Einstein Institute. And when each and every one of you goes through these organizations, there is in your computer a list of members of the Council on Foreign Relations. You can go through that list, and that will be you'll find 2 or 3 of these people every place, everywhere. And they direct which way these regime changes are going. Again, Nobel Peace Prizes. The guy that invented dynamite usually tries to give credentials to somebody they're going to elevate in the world. Once in a while they give it to a real scientist, but mostly it's political, and it's designed to elevate somebody in order to give them some kudos, whether it's Obama or whoever they're grooming. But
So what are they doing when they go from dictatorship to democracy?
well, again, it's a regime change. You'll notice in Egypt right now, in the people that show up to the square are now imprisoned. The people that were so popularized by our news media that said we need to get rid of Mubarak, and now you get a demonstrator there, and they're whisked off to jail. And it turns out these people are Mubarak, I can't get the name right here. But anyway, I understand he had a stroke, as did the former head of Tunisia. But it's amazing what's going on.
And then he recovered from his stroke, and he came out and made a statement, and then he had a heart attack. Mubarak just had a heart attack.
Yeah, well, this happens. Let's see. Okay, the bulldozer revolution. That was the one in Yugoslavia, again, where they took our airplanes, they put the United Nations logo on it, and they went in there and bombed bridges that had been up for 1,000, 1,500 years. Just absolutely, totally outrageous. They're in no better shape than they were before. They just wanted to get rid of them because they did not fit into the European Union. They needed to destroy the national sovereignty to make them a malleable group and people, where again all the laws are made uniform, and the individuality of the people are being destroyed. And again, their plans. You're merely a resource, and they intend on using chemicals on you, behavioral systems. The fact that we let our kids go to government schools is absolutely outrageous to do that. You're better off homeschooling your kid. If you have anybody that's going to public schools, you need to sponsor your son or daughter or somebody that can teach your own kids, because they'll get much better education than the re-education or brainwashing they're getting in the public schools. I don't know whatever the slides. Okay. Yeah, again, Russia was given a deal with the 1989 surrendering or collapsing, and they were supposed to be given their area of influence. And again, the government, through the National Endowment for Democracy and a handful of other ones, again, laced with these members from the intelligence agencies and the military, are going through there and creating havoc, making client or puppet states for the international community, mostly the Western community. Let's see. Okay, and again, some of these people end up with. I think he broke out in a horrible rash. You've had other people. One of the persons that got out of the Soviet Union that wrote a book about their own Moscow bombings had their own 9/11s here, and he ended up in London and dying in an oxygen tent. But it's a rough game out there that they're playing. Again, I don't know too much detail on each and every one of these, but they're becoming pretty much cookie cutter, with the Americans moving in there with foundation and United States money, supporting institutions, supporting political candidates, again to...
Well, this is where they have the massive air base, which is essential to our war in Afghanistan, and it's right on the border of China.
And again, the Air America has not changed at all, now called Evergreen International Aviation. The drugs are coming from Afghanistan as they used to come from Central America and the Golden Triangle. And in the Golden Triangle, we had another, hero, Bo Greitz, that came from trying to relieve or find some POWs, came back with film from Kun Sa, who was the head of the heroin down there and wanting to get out of the business, trying to cut a deal with the United States. And of course he was refused by Skull and Bones Bush. And fortunately, Bo Greitz is still alive. But he's got the actual footage of Kun Sa making the offer to get out of the business. And they weren't interested.
Yeah, the prosecutor in the case against Bo Greitz for using false identity documents which were given to him by the State Department, the prosecutor testified on TV in Las Vegas that he was personally ordered by Bush to put Greitz in federal prison.
Well, when he had returned to Los Angeles, Anthony Hilder had a radio show in the county of Ventura. I happened to be at the show that night. We were doing a dual show. And he had got a call from Bo Greitz that he was just returning, and the government had already picked up his radio man. So we just stayed pat all night and broadcast into L.A. to give him a high enough profile so that he didn't end up with a heart attack or stroke. And again, that coon saw, you can find that probably still on the internet. And I'll mention another item too, a little bit off of this, but actually it ties to it. When I had run for office, I ran from this area here against Leon Panetta. And two things should be of note. One, my house was broken into, a lot of things followed and other things had happened. And I got a call from Paul Beatty, who is working for the Sentinel. He's an independent reporter, a socialist bent, very honest man. And he said, man from Hawk International came in, they wanted your files, the files we have on you, because they keep files when they do reports and pictures and so forth. And he says, I won't do that with, except for material that we've already published. And he says, we're going with it tomorrow, banner headlines. It was in an afternoon paper. It was just as Bruce McPherson was selling out to the Wall Street Journal, where they kept him in as editor for the following years. In fact, the head of the Dow Jones that bought the paper, the lady's name was Karen House, related to Colonel House, by the way. But anyway, it was Hawk International. So it turns out Hawk International was hired by J. William Dillsworth. He's a member of Skull and Bones. He runs Rockefeller Family Associates. 2 floors in a huge building in New York, runs 300 different organizations under the Rockefeller wing. But he had Skull and Bones coming after me because I'm bitching about the Trilateral Commission. And we put out some tabloids on it. But that's how powerful. Then when I went back to Washington, D.C., I won the nomination, the contested primary, and Reagan was in the White House. And the winners from all the congressional districts were invited back to meet and talk to some cabinet members and lobbyists and see if you can get any additional help for your campaigns. But it really was a dog and pony show. And he was talking to the press, and he was talking about the taxes he cut. Well, he didn't cut any taxes. It was the largest tax increase in history, which was the exact opposite of what the newspapers were saying. And I was sitting like you. And when he's talking, I'm going, this is a dog and pony show. I wasn't elected for this, but the exact opposite of what I stood for. So I stood up and I said, hey, wait a minute. You're lying about that. You said you were against Jimmy Carter's trilat appointments. You did that wrong. You're shipping wheat to the Soviet Union and we're getting a shaft, Anyway, I went through that, and then he finally said, shut up. And so that went viral. So we were on the Good Morning America and Crossfire, mostly the Gannett newspapers and so forth on the front page. So on Crossfire, which was Pat Buchanan and Tom Braden. Tom Braden was the man in charge. We were talking earlier about that American Committee for United Europe. He was the CIA person responsible for getting money to the various institutions and candidates to create that North American Union and to cause trouble for those groups and independent groups that wouldn't go along with them. And he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. But that interview, which I opened up a page with the Trilateral Commission, I'm sure this has one in there, one of the pages. It's a terrific design that most people have seen one time or another. It's spread out. It's got the cabinet members, all the ones in the media, the ones in the unions that are selling out the union people, Trilats from the lady garment workers and the AFL-CIO. They're all partying because they're keeping the wages down for the poor bastards that are working for the cartels. And they don't know these guys are palling around with Rockefeller. They're on demand. They'll do their demonstrations or whatever. And the same with the churches. It was Alan Dulles, head of the National Council of Churches. Today it's Rick Warren down in Southern California, member of the Council on Foreign Relations. All these churches, they're called the purpose-driven churches, and they have a do-good type a formula that recruits a lot of people. But they're all controlled under good titles. The other one, the U.S. military, the banks. Anyway, it's really laid out, very, very well. So anyway, that got on national TV for the first time ever. There wasn't the internet in those days. There wasn't DVDs. So we got 1 billion hits around the world with the information. So it permeated and got locked into a lot of other researchers. So it carried until today's electronic media and people like Alex Jones and Monteith and a lot of you people out here that have been, kicking the can down the road. But they're down. They're coming. This is now the killing fields. We're in them. We're sitting in them, and they're dropping the poison. They're tightening the screws. They've deindustrialized us, and they're still doing it. I mean, you go to any of these city councils, they're doing anything they can. The other issue that came up on there was the fact that somebody wanted to hold back the requirements for, wind power and other stuff that would be really expensive until we got, like a 7 or 10% unemployment or something more reasonable. But they voted against that. I mean, the screws are just, they're doing everything they can to hurt you. And at the same time, they're doing these fusion centers. They're taking away local police. They're combining them and training them so that they can be moved around and they won't be local to you. They'll be on orders, and they'll give them a good reason to come after you. If you can just go through those again. I don't have the details. I have more detail on the individual names, and that could get a little boring.
This was just the women in Kuwait demanding the vote, which they did get. In a one-day demonstration, the Kuwaiti authorities caved, but it was a great celebration. And you can see how happy the Iraqis are there on the left.
They don't have voter fraud. You get a print when you vote.
Well, they have the largest United States embassy in the world now, I understand. And all those contracts that were done before we ever invaded. This is outrageous.
Staff in the U.S. embassy in Iraq right now.
I mean, it's criminal.
And this is the young woman who there were 2 videos of her dying. She was shot in a demonstration on camera. She was on camera when she was shot, and she bled out on camera. And of course, she was a rallying cry for these people who wanted to topple the tremendously corrupt ayatollahs in Iran who don't have a Rothschild central bank. They do. And they use the Sharia law for their banking.
Bruce, should that say Iran on top of Iraq?
Slide is wrong.
Oh.
Oh no, okay. When I copied that slide and I didn't change the letter, so I'm sorry about that. It's Iran, I'm sorry.
Now, there's a lot of things you can be doing. Alex Jones is in this area is on 6 hours a day. I mean, it's really a blessing. So there should be a time when you can listen to him. A lot of valuable information. We've got DVDs here almost all the time for almost nothing. It's time to face the family and let them know what's going on. In fact, what would be great is if a few of you could come up with presentations as how to address a relative that don't particularly want to, like, hey, I'm sorry to do this, but I really want you to look at this. Things are really getting tough. So if you can come up with a couple combinations like that, you need to do it. But if somebody's got a nice way to state that, help. And again, a letter to the editor, if you can't get in there, sometimes they're a little bit tight with those, but you can usually get on the blogs. You got to be active. Do the important things to take care of yourselves. But the other thing I don't want to see done is that we crawl into a hole to just survive. We got to fight back. And they don't know how to take it. I'm sure our friend from We Are Change can probably tell you a lot of different stories on how there is a very positive. The action is in the reaction, and you can do a lot of good. There's groups out here that can really help. The information is all over the place, and we're going to try to get more professional with our stories and keep them shorter so that you can get them out in manageable pieces.
So these are the guys who got this guy toppled, so they brought in the military who outlawed the demonstrations.
Right. What was it? El Labari, the man that was shaking hands with our State Department, and from the United Nations again, was a man that designed to go in there and be a power broker to replace.
Right. And I was just listening to NPR today, and apparently they've got a guy from the Muslim Brotherhood who can work with the internationalists, and he's being pushed as being the next guy for the elections that are coming up in the fall.
Right. Well, the other thing which is interesting in this, they've succeeded. They've had a lot of benefits. They've had a lot of gain through their world wars. And Albert Pike, who was the guy that founded the KKK, of which and I'll try to stay straight with this, with so many branches on this thing. Albert Pike wrote a letter to Mazzini, or at least it's reported that he did, and it's reported in a book called Pawns in the Game by William Guy Carr, a Canadian intelligence person way back in the 50s or 60s. And he talked about how the Third World War would be created in the Middle East using the Israelis and the Muslims by doing exactly what's going on here. Now, Albert Pike is really big among the Masons. There's a big statue of him in Washington, D.C., and he wrote Morals and Dogma, and it's a book they've used up until the last 15 years or so. But most of the Masonic sites have him as a hero that you can go to. They're not hiding it. But he was responsible for the KKK. Add an extra K. For the KKK. We've had a few KKK people around, it's like Harry Truman, Harry Byrd from West Virginia. One of the Supreme Court justices, but
this is out of sequence. This is a color revolution that went back in 1974, and they kicked out the guy on the right. They brought in the generals, and it was a socialist revolution, and it was run by basically by the international communists. They tried to get a social media, Twitter, Facebook revolution in China in the wake of the Egyptian revolution just this year, and they got a whole lot of young activists arrested and they disappeared.
well, here's a revolution during the time Reagan was in there, and it says this is George Bush. This is when they put in the Marxist in Zimbabwe. Bush openly stated before Rob Mugabe, who was identified as a communist and Marxist, I do want to say on behalf of the Reagan administration that we strongly support the policy to reconciliation to which you have committed yourself. We believe Zimbabwe represents a noble experiment. We have supported your country because its success is consistent with U.S. principles and U.S. interests. I will report to President Reagan that Zimbabwe continues to deserve our support because America is committed to backing peaceful change. And if you have any idea what Mugabe did, you'll understand that. And they're still doing this, and this is why it comes under left and right, whether it's the School of Chicago by Klein, or here's again another one where the Philippines. The person was trained in the United States, went back to Marcos, and overthrew the Marcos regime after all the commitments and so forth. But it's a regime change at will anytime these internationalists want to do it.
Well, you have the same thing in Libya, where the guy who is the head of the supposedly freedom-fighting militias against Gaddafi has been living in Langley, Virginia for the last 20 years.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, but
the president.
Okay.
I want to get into this is a 10-minute video. It's really, really excellent, but I don't know, we're kind of running long, so we should maybe skip this. It's Louis Farrakhan in a message to President Obama about what he's doing in Tunisia. He just calls it the way it is, and it's totally illegal. It's totally illegal. I think this is good. It's about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Libya photo investigation.
I present to you the armor-piercing material that demonstrates the real source of revolution in Libya. You will see that the rebels have new foreign weapons which were not adopted by the Libyan military forces. Foreign instructors, foreign weapons, foreign money, foreign scenario, but native blood. When the flow of pictures from Libya started, the evident staged character of the pictures led one to want to take a deeper look at the situation. Note, all the pictures shown were taken by Western journalists, highlighting the situation from the rebel standpoint only. And from the very first frames of film that hit me, The weapons and equipment of those rebels simply could not have been so massive in number and so brand new. Unless the weapons somehow found their way there on time from the outside. Please look for yourself. I could be wrong, but do you think this adds up? This is the first photo that really caught my attention. You can see in this ordinary demonstrator's hands the light automatic rifle FN-FAL, absolutely brand new, right out of the box. The rifle was produced by the Belgian armaments manufacturer FN. During the Cold War, it was adopted by many North Atlantic Treaty Organization countries, with the notable exception of the United States. It's one of the most widely used rifles in history, having been used by over 90 countries. The light automatic rifle was predominantly chambered for the 7.62 by 51 millimeter NATO round, and because of its prevalence and widespread use amongst the armed forces of many NATO countries during the Cold War, it was nicknamed the right hand of the free world. This guy has another brand new FN-FAL. And as does this guy as well. In the next photo you can see a mob scene and a guy wearing a white headscarf. He also has an FN-FAL. Now, how could all these people get such a weapon in such good condition? The rifle is not and has never been adopted by the Libyan army. Usually Libyan soldiers run around with old Kalashnikovs, like this one. This means that the rebels could not get all of those FN-FAL rifles from military storage points, and they certainly couldn't buy them in a store. So the question is, where did they get them from? And even more importantly, how could they get the enormous amounts of ammo needed for the rifles when Gaddafi didn't have them? Let's also take a look at the machine guns. Well, the ancient DSHK Soviet heavy anti-aircraft machine gun firing 12.7 by 108 millimeter rounds is actually quite normal for paramilitary nomads. But where did this thing come from? Or this. As you can see, these are U.S. machine guns chambered for NATO rounds. And again, they're absolutely brand new, right out of the box. Gaddafi couldn't have a weapon like this because of 40 years of embargo. And also, he really wouldn't need it because the rounds for it are very expensive and getting them delivered is a big problem. It'd be much cheaper and much easier to buy Chinese machine guns chambered for Soviet rounds. Oh, well, there we go. That's a Chinese heavy machine gun. But this picture is interesting not because of the machine gun itself, but because of the fact that the machine gun is again brand new, right from the plant, as well as the instructors who are teaching the Libyan fodder how to use the weapon. And now can you see what this is hinting at? Normally machine guns don't come with their own instructors to teach you how to use them. But then again, machine guns alone don't win a revolution. You need something with some real firepower. And well, here's something. This is an MP-80S man-portable air defense system. Each one of these costs big money on the black market and requires a qualified professional to maintain them. And so that's why we can see an instructor here. The guy teaching the Libyans to manage this high-tech device sure doesn't look like one of them, does he? And here we can see a Joker running around with a U.S. Army pistol and a NATO Kevlar combat helmet. Now how could he get all this? From Gaddafi's military storage? Come on. But most of all, I like this picture. And what do we have here? Two natives holding a crate of 106mm rounds for the recoilless M40 rifle. The native bin Laden among them points to where to carry the crate. The M40 recoilless rifle is a lightweight, portable, crew-served 105mm weapon intended primarily as an anti-tank weapon made in the United States. Okay, this crate is American and brand new. I think you can realize that by now. For example, if you look at the perfect condition of the crate, straps, come on, you can't tell me that this came from Gaddafi's ancient storages. Excuse me, but if you still think this, I doubt the adequacy of your perception of reality, sir. Let me remind you, Libya had a 40-year embargo, so there's no way that Libya could have bought the weapons or the rounds from the US or the UK. It's purely fiction. And by the way, here you can see the recoilless M40 itself. As you can see here, the rifle and the Toyota mini truck don't really give you the impression of a scrappy rebel force fighting for freedom. Wow, and among the rebels we can surprisingly see some African mercenaries that were allegedly hired by Gaddafi to fire on the people. So finally, what is the general conclusion that you can make from our brief photo investigation?
Well, we can see a lot of brand new NATO weapons. Foreign instructors, American ammo, new uniforms and equipment, and a suspiciously large amount of non-Libyan mugs.
Do you know what this looks like? You're absolutely right. It definitely looks like a well-organized coup from abroad. The foreign managers have brought the people, provided the brand new weapons,
instructors, and equipment, all to the young people in Libya. Naive young people who will work for free drugs, dope, and just the rush of being revolutionary. Well, maybe you still don't believe me. You've taken a look at all the photos, and there's still some doubt. Well, let me show you one last photo. This is what a real desert fighter looks like. No clean NATO weapons, no shining brand new American ammo from unopened boxes, and no Kevlar vests from Europe. Just some rags, an old gun, an axe, and the will to fight. That's what you see there, and that's what everyone fighting should look like. So what's your opinion now? Do you really think all those people in the previous photos are real common demonstrators? What do you think?
Very good. We have projects. Well, I think that was really the cherry on the cake there to understand that. And then the fact, again, the left and the right, how they use you, how they're going to create the emotion to drive you to action or inaction. They're going to use it constantly, all that behavioral stuff I was reading. And they're messing with us, you know, internally and behaviorally and every other way. There's another old, sorry, that's okay. There's another real old presentation on how the left and the right is used. And it goes through 4 or 5 different steps about creating the appearance of popular support and using terror and using two sides against each other. It's called Anarchy USA, and you can find that on a Google on a Google site. And some of that will get your emotions going a little bit. It'll be a good test to, you know, see how to control it. But it shows the methods in which they use to control us and to get us acting in the way they want us to act. But anyway, thank you very much. You've been a very quiet and patient audience. If you want to do a few questions, I can do that. I see it. Maybe the question, Don?
I just have a short little announcement. Google at the end of the month is not allowing any more uploads, and by about mid-next month, they're shutting the entire site down. If you've uploaded any videos to Google, grab them. If there's anything up there that you want, grab it, because it is going completely offline within about a month. It's done.
Why don't you run for
I have a few times. Takes a little bit of money. This is David Rockefeller's own memoirs, his own autobiography. And I think if anybody's maligned him, this is what he says. He says, some people believe we're part of a secret cabal working against the best interest of the U.S., characterizing my family and me as internationalists and conspiring with others around the world to build a global economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it. So there's no more guessing. Yes?
So I'm really curious, how on earth, according to this training manual of the War Department on citizenship, how was democracy sold to the American people as a buzzword? I mean, I just don't get when and how democracy became a good thing.
Yeah, Ellie's asking
it's been a good thing.
how democracy, became the nice word. And obviously, the definition that we have in there, I think it's 1928 on the brochure. We went to war during World War I with all the newspapers, and we heard that Congressman Callaway was talking that trying to buy the major newspapers to influence the rest of the United States, and they only needed to buy 25 or whatever it was to reach everybody. And that was a war to make the world safe for democracy. So that it had to happen probably at the turn of the century when the cabals owned all of the newspapers.
So was there a false enemy set up?
Yeah, we came into World War I pretty late, and it was the sinking of the Lusitania. And the Lusitania was a British ship carrying munitions. It was acting illegally, but they wanted to get Americans on it in order to bring the Americans into the war. They pulled these ships that normally assist it back in order to draw the fire.
But was the term democracy brought in as an answer to a perceived threat? I mean, when did it just started kind of slipped in to our mainstream conversation?
Okay, again, my guess will be the Rockefeller Education Board that took over kind of nationalized the schools. You've got the combining of the newspapers selling democracy as something good. We are a democratic republic in the fact that we elect the people to represent us to go do the things we want them to do, and if they don't do it, then we're supposed to change them out. So the word democracy in democratic republic was considered a good thing, but what they did was they severed it from the republic portion. And of course, the communist countries, like the Republic of China and the U.S., Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, took republic, and everybody's running with a different title. It's like whether you're a rebel or you're a whatever, they're just slapping titles all over the place. But it's a good question to search out where democracy started being really pushed.
I was wondering what you think of Tim Geithner. I saw him on the news saying that that the Congress was going to raise the debt ceiling, that there was no question about it. And then I've heard also that there was questions with the Tea Party, whether the Tea Party could actually have enough clout to actually not extend the debt ceiling. Do you know anything about that, or? I know this isn't quite.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I don't think the Tea Party has enough clout yet. They did make a big inroad last time. The Timothy Geithner was on the Federal Reserve and connected with all the various banks. His father, Philip Geithner, in fact, was handing out Ford Foundation money to his mother. She was connected with a number of banks, and she was doing what they were doing with the color revolutions in Indonesia, sorting out Ford money to the various institutions and political groups that was conducive to their operation in Indonesia. So she had, there was CIA activity within the Barack family for a long time, and I think that's basically what he's trying to cover with the birth records, because I believe when he went to school, for convenience, he was booked in as a foreign student, and it just got meshed. But he's had, if anybody's seen the movie, I recommend it. It's called The Boys from Brazil, and it's where people from Germany ended up in Brazil, and they were wanting to create another Hitler. So they created the conditions that Hitler had, like a welfare mother and a father that worked for the state or whatever. Very interesting thing, but they believe in this behaviorism and you as a end product. That you're a resource that can be fashioned. And I think that it's just not Barack Obama. I think they probably got several hundred people that are groomed and possible candidates, and they run them for local offices and so forth around the community. We've had them in our own community here. And you can find, I can name a few from Stanford and a few other places. But the Republican that's the head of the Republican delegation in California is a man by the name of David Dreyer. He lives down towards Los Angeles. He's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He did a oration for Peter Drucker, who's the man that designs all systems and procedures for the huge companies on how to get the most out of workers. He was an advisor to Rick Warren, who I mentioned earlier about the purpose-driven church. So they're very good with their systems and procedures.
That's Saddleback.
Yes, yeah. And, approaching these or attending a lot of these organizations, whether it's the left, the right, the environment, the socialists that are against, the people that opposed the World War I, Eugene Debs, and people like that were legitimate, but they were standing, shoulder to shoulder with people like who's the flyer of the aviation, Lindbergh, and his father was a congressman at the time, and so they were America first. They wanted to stay out of the wars and really be about the business of America rather than supporting the internationalists that want to control the world and use our resources and our life and our blood. Yes.
A couple of questions. Thanks for doing what you're doing anyway. I appreciate that. Is there any evidence that JFK was a member of a secret society or CFR? And I'm wondering what your opinion is of the Venus Project. That's an outshoot of the Zeitgeist movie. Jacques Fresco, I think his name is. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with your Venus Project, but John F. Kennedy, his father, of course, was the ambassador to England, and as such, he knew where the best schools were, which was, where the royalty and the people that were in power. And that was the London School of Economics. We have today, in fact, since the gentleman here that's filming has a lot to do with England with his contacts back there. But there was, during World War II, or a little bit afterwards, I think, Hugh Gateskill ran for Prime Minister in England. And he was supported by a magazine called Encounter. And Encounter was funded by the CIA, and the person in charge of the Encounter magazine was Irving Kristol. Now, if anybody knows who Irving Kristol is, he wrote the book. He is the father of the neocon movement. His son runs the Weekly Standard, and that's William Kristol. And again, this is all part of the project for a new American century. The neocons are made up of old Trotskyites, the split off from the Soviet Union to the United States. You can go back, you can get more information from an Esquire magazine. You go back to an old Esquire magazine that talks all about Gene Kirkpatrick and Moynihan and Irving Kristol and Jack Kemp and these meetings, these group meetings in which included they were Trotskyites in all ways, shape, and form. And they decided they'd occupy the Republican Party, and they've been pretty successful at controlling much of it. And again, they work, parties don't mean that stuff except to how you vote.
You're saying that JFK's father was part of a secret society.
Oh, no, I'm not.
JFK himself, it seems as though in his speech, he was saying that we don't want these secret societies.
Right. His father was well connected for a long time. I think his father wanted to stay out of the war with Germany. I think a lot of their fortune came from the Prohibition. where they broke the rules, just like William Russell, the founder of the Skull and Bones, made his money selling the drugs. A lot of the powerful people make their way illegally with the protection of the government, and that's what we're running under now. Is we've got a corporate cabal. The people that succeed are blessed, and those that don't are us trying to practice free enterprise, and they're trying to block it every way, shape, and form. And that's the process. The culling and the advocation of reducing the world's population is very big on their agenda, and they've been moving that along for a long time, and they're in position, and they're the soft kill's going on.
Yeah, I heard Gaddafi was working on this Great Man-Made River project.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was like, without help from the World Bank, he had funded the project basically, and it was like, yeah, anything that would make a country prosper, that's to have more sovereignty. I mean,
right. Well, Libya was the most prosperous country in Africa because they weren't connected with the banks, and that's not permittable. Just like Yugoslavia, they had to change that to tie it in, because then they can they don't want any opposition, any place, anywhere, anytime. And we're their useless eaters right now. So we're on their,
I didn't realize one of the biggest underground aquifers, one of the biggest aquifers is in that area.
Oh, yeah.
It's the biggest one in the world, I think.
Yeah. No, they made great strides in roads and buildings and aqueducts, and they were nationalists, and that's what they do there is their business. And they were more secular. What's happening through these regime changes is the Wahhabi and the Saudi Arabia form of religion is being sprinkled throughout these regime changes in order to prepare for that Third World War. So they're taking away the freedom, and they're excluding the secularists and the Christians and driving them out to create this hard Third World War again. And they'll have people dying in the streets, and they'll show the worst type things, a lot of them which are just created fiction. They'll make it up. They'll lie. You look at how they've lied in the last 6 weeks just on Libya. I mean, it's just one lie after another. You can't believe a one of them. And they're all connected. I mean, that's the easy part. It's if you started studying baseball after a season, you'd know the teams and some of the best players and the ones that will be the pinch hitter. It's not that hard. They're out there. They got formal names. It's easy. And Skull and Bones is even less, 15 a year. There's only 1,600, maybe 600 or 800 alive at any one time. And a third of them don't participate. Some of them just go off into regular, business and just don't want any part of it. Yes?
What would the purpose be for having the U.S. and Israel against Japan?
Against?
Japan.
Japan? I'm trying to think.
I did some research a while back, and I put in the word rogue, because the word rogue was used a lot in the election. And I put the word Japan in, so rogue plus Japan, and I got quite a number of hits on Google, of course, but one of those was Hillary Clinton making mention during one of her speeches about she was really surprised that the government of Japan had gone rogue.
Oh, okay. I don't know about that particular circumstance, but I do know that after World War II, we went in there with our systems and procedures under MacArthur. We changed everything around, and we still have troops there to this day, denied them an army for self-defense. We still have troops in Germany, which are there. The German Marshall Fund, which that little city manager that I mentioned about belonged to, is taxes taken from the Germans that goes into a fund that's directed by the people from the United States and the World Bank and us. So they're not really totally free today with our troops. And how would we like occupying troops for a half a century? And that's why we get the blowback too. I'm surprised there's not more people from those Arab countries that are outraged by what we've done to them. My word.
We essentially closed their auto industry down.
Boy, that with the uranium and thing, that looks really bad. My guess is that there's going to be a lot of fourth quarters that aren't going to look very good come a few more weeks, because those parts are needed around the world for processing, and that'll take some time to do. So this rise in the stock market, I just don't get the connection.
They just decided to pull 70% of their industry in the United States out, so we've got a lot of workers that are now employed by their companies that are going to be unemployed.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yes.
What about the euro? If it does not remain intact, is that their Achilles heel? At some point, we're going to run out of money. We can't afford to have all our military all around the world. At some point, it sounds like the euro might be in trouble. It sounds like they may not be able to pull this stuff off.
Yeah, I'm encouraged about that, although these frat boys from these secret societies usually have plan upon alternative and other scenarios in which to work. I think they've been put back a long period of time. I think they believe that their world government would have been established by the year 2000. They always thought that would be. And there's been little groups, random sometimes, like the John Birch Society or the just various groups that get them off. And fortunately, we do random things that mess them up. It's the broomstick and the bicycle spokes. You can stop it real quick. And they too. They have their health problems. They have marital problems. They have emotional problems. They're like us. They're not gods. And we have the truth for the first, not for the first time, but we have the ability to move that truth, unlike ever before. Before, the papers would they paper over you. Nobody'd know that anybody else existed. Nobody could confirm. You didn't know if you had disinformation or it was real or not. We got all that right now. And that warning the gentleman gave in the back room about Google taking down things, that's really bad. That's where they're going after. So you got to use what we got now. And we are changed, guys like this. You get up there and you make a statement and it goes viral. The little kid pointing to the king with no clothes. That's it. Chemtrails. Look at that. They're doing it. They're lying. You catch them in their lies.
What do you think the buy-in is for the ordinary person that's a good person that joins into like secret societies, like says, I want to join the Masons, like you would want to join the Masons because you want to own a chain of grocery stores or whatever, and so you join it because then you have business contacts. And as you farther go up the line, some of these people are born into it, like you were saying, that they're all related. The father was in it, the mother's doing it, the brother. It's a whole, like the British monarchy, everybody intermarrying. But some of it's not. Some of them are just ordinary people. They get into it and they seem to be committed to this cause that they will never see to fruition. Do you see what I'm saying? It's going to take a lifetime. This work, the great work, has been going on for generations, and people don't live that long. And it's not likely that a person would commit to a cause that they themselves aren't going to see a personal benefit in. Like, what would I gain?
Yeah. The lady's asking about the
world order. That I'm not personally going to ruin because I won't be alive to see it.
Right. She's talking about the culpability of people that belong to organizations, and I think this is the real mistake or the problem that occurred when during the Red years, from the 1920s through the 40s, when communist front organizations proliferated all over the place, and the titles were beckoning. She mentioned the Masons. My father joined the Masons for a short time. It took up too much of his time, but he did it for business purposes, thinking of it as a Kiwanis or a Rotary or whatever, just to become engaged. And most people don't devote their lives. But what's interesting about that is it's segmented. I mean, because of the various moving towards the center circle. So somebody at the lower circles, you can how do you verify something that's going on way up at the top? And so before, all the communications, all the electronic communications, especially during the 1800s and times like that, a secret society is, a Masonic society is a great way to move in and out and keep your secrets from other people and to accomplish a lot. The Rotarians, by the way, they're an official extension of the United Nations, and part of their oath or whatever, at least if you go to their site, is to support the United Nations. That's part of it. I didn't bring that particular book, but H.W. Bush, a former head of the CIA, when Nixon got put in, he appointed George Bush as head of the CIA, and then he was ambassador to Communist China. His uncle was the head of the Chinese-American Chamber of Commerce. So this is where all our industry and everything went to. It was to Communist China. So our industry is not afraid of the communists in China because they've got their assets there. They're afraid of the American people because we have our votes and we might become independent once again. But the same thing happened with the Soviet Union. We put the Soviet Union together. Sutton's trilogy shows we funded it. Arm & Hammer was there. All the rest of them were there, building truck factories. Ford was there. The rest of them, creating the enemy. And the same thing happened with Hitler. And that would take a lot more time. But it goes back to the Union Bank. Averell Harriman is the godfather of the Democratic Party, Skull and Bones. And of course, the Bushes, after generation after generation, has been active in the Republican Party, together with the Chafees, and you just go down the list. It's kind of fun. Again, you put the players on there. You can put it on a board and give them different values. But a gaggle of foundations is the way they've been very successful. One of the important Skull and Bones people is a man by the name of Daniel Coit Gilman. He's the one that incorporated the Skull and Bones into the Russell Trust. They own a whole island called Deer Island. If you get the movie, I can't think of it. I'll think of it in a minute. But Daniel Coit Gilman, he was the head of the California school system until a socialist newspaper started checking out what was going on with him and his activities, and he left the state, and there's a letter that came up in some historical thing saying, I got out of California just in the nick of time. But he incorporated Carnegie endowment, and he's a very busy person. Went back to Cornell, real busy, powerful person. But that's Daniel Coit Gilman. In fact, it was the Granges, get this, it was the Granges that drove Daniel Coit Gilman out of California. And I don't know if that's Googleable. I don't know if you can Google that, but you can find it in one of Sutton's books when he was ferreting out Daniel Coit Gilman.
Thanks, Gary.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.